So this is a classification of the rate of inflation based on the average rise in the general level of prices. Then another classification, number 2, based on the reasons behind inflation, causes or reason behind inflation. Inflation may also be classified as number 1, demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation. And this demand pull inflation is, of course, because of what reason? Because of the demand pull, increase in the demand. Increase in the demand may be due to what reason? People may have more purchasing power with them. We may have at our disposal a lot of money, and that money with which we go to the market and demand commodities. So the reason for the increased demand may be sufficient purchasing power, liquid cash with us. And so that demand pull inflation is defined as too much quantity of money chasing too few goods and services. Too much quantity of money chasing too few goods and services. Our goods and services available in the market is only very little. Whereas people may have a lot of money with their disposal. And so with this money, they are coming in the market and demanding various type of commodities. But the scarcity of commodities, a lot of money is chasing too few goods available in the market. And since the goods and services are insufficient to satisfy the demand, we find the resulting price rise. The resulting price rise as the demand pull inflation. The demand pull inflation is defined as the too much quantity of money chasing too few goods and services. A resulting push in the demand for commodities and the scarcity of commodities in the market, leading to rising prices, which is what is known as demand pull inflation. But the cause is demand, and the demand increases because of too much quantity of money in the economy. Then another type of inflation on basis of the reason is cost push inflation. Cost push inflation. Cost of production rising. It can be another reason for rising inflation, that is cost push inflation. Cost of production is rising. Why? What may be the reason for the cost of production to rise? We may say wage rise. Daily, sometimes these laborers bargaining for higher and higher wage rate. Because of what reason? Because of the strong trade union present in the country. If there is strong trade union is existing and scarcity of skilled and semi-skilled labor is existing. On the one side, there is a scarcity of skilled and semi-skilled laborers. For example, we may say carpenter for painters. Carpenter, painter, mason, electrician, welder, and such types of semi-skilled persons are not sufficiently available. Scarcity is felt, and so that they will bargain for higher and higher wage rate, especially when there is strong trade union is existing. About the presence of strong trade union and the scarcity of laborers in the market will push up the wage rate. Cost of production is rising, and according to the rise in the cost of production, prices will also increase. Producers will charge higher and higher prices because their cost of production is rising due to wage rate rising. Now similarly, there can also be another reason. For example, in case of India, petrol price. Usually there is a petrol price rise is seen, which is also the reason for rising transportation cost, rising cost of production, another reason. Whatever it may be, due to a rise in the cost of production in the country, the resulting rise in the general level of prices, we call it as cost push inflation. There can be on the reason basis two types where demand pull inflation due to too much quantity of money circulating in the economy, cost push inflation because of wage structure in the economy or the petrol price hike, etc., leading to higher and higher prices. We have reason based classification of inflation. Then we have a number of other concepts recently we have number of concepts relating to inflation. What are the terms in connection with inflation recently developed? Current concepts on inflation. Current concepts on inflation. What are the new terms currently used to describe inflation in the economy? Current terms for inflation to exist in the country. Number one is disinflation. Number one is disinflation. One concept is disinflation. Disinflation refers to a reduction in the severity of inflationary pressure in the country. Reduction in the severity of inflationary pressure in the country. For example, suppose some 6 months back, the rate of inflation in the country, let us assume 5%. Some 6 months back, the rate of inflation existing in the country was 5%. 5% level of prices was existing in average. And due to the monetary policy measures adopted by the Reserve Bank or the central government policy, fiscal policy, we could reduce, suppose, the pressure of inflation reduced to 4%, 1% reduction. Isn't it? Can you consider this reduction in the general level of prices as deflation? No, it is not deflation. It cannot be considered as deflation because there is only a reduction in the severity of inflationary pressure in the country. From 5% it is reduced to 4%. At 4% it is continuing. And so that this is not what is called deflation. It is disinflation. Inflation reduced from 5% to 4%. In the next month, suppose it is reduced to 3%, that is also not deflation. We say it is disinflation. 2%, subsequently it is reduced to 2%, reduced to 1%, and the next month there is no change, 0% variation. Up to this we see there is no deflation starting in the economy, only inflation continuing at lesser and lesser degree. Severity of inflationary pressure is reduced. This is what is called disinflation. This is called disinflation, and when the economy turns negative, for example, the average rise in the price is subsequently -1, negative, -2, -3, etc., we start the deflation in the country. But deflation is because of what? When the price rise become negative. Negative inflation is what is called deflation. When it turns minus, below zero, when the average rise in the general level of prices turns negative, we have the opposite of inflation, namely deflation resulting in the economy. When it becomes severe, for example, minus, suppose very severe negative trend, it leads to crisis situation. It leads to a depression or crisis situation, deep level of reduction in the general price level below zero. Below zero onwards, we have negative inflation. From negative inflation onwards, we have what is called deflation, and deflation may become very severe when we have depression or crisis existing. Up to this period, we have only disinflation and not we have deflation or a crisis started in the country. Number 2, second term is agflation. Agflation means this word was generated in 2007. In 2007, based on American experience. In USA, there is a place, Merrill Lynch, a place in USA. And in that place, Merrill Lynch, the agricultural commodity prices alone went up. without affecting industrial manufactural commodities. Manufactured commodity, no change. Industrial commodity, no change. Only we find the agricultural commodity prices alone was going up and up initially, and subsequently it has resulted a generalized inflation. A generalized inflation, almost all the other commodities affected only subsequently. Initially, it was from agricultural commodity price rise, the inflation started. Such a agricultural commodity price increase is what is known as agflation, agricultural inflation, agricultural commodity inflation, according to the experience in Merrill Lynch, USA. We have the second term, agflation. Number 3, built-in inflation. Built-in inflation. That is, in other words, known as price wage spiral. Built-in inflation. Built-in inflation. Built-in inflation, or what is called the price spiral, wage price spiral, price and wage spiral. That is a vicious circle. You may find sometimes a vicious circle of rising prices. For example, when there is a scarcity of labor, especially skilled and semi-skilled, scarcity labor is there, strong trade union is there, then usually there will be more and more, higher and higher demand for wage rate, and as a result, since there is a scarcity is existing, the wage rate will be going on increasing, and the cost of production will be rising. When the cost of production is rising, you see, the cost to push inflation happens. Since the cost of production is rising, commodity prices will again go up. Due to what reason? Due to the rising cost of production. When the cost of production is increasing, what will happen? The cost of living of the laboring class of person especially is increasing. Laborers will find that their cost of living is increasing. Since their cost of living is increasing, they will again demand higher wage rate. And that higher wage rate also we have to allow, because there is a scarcity of labor is existing. And so that we may allow higher wage rate, again that will lead to cost push inflation. In this manner, without any end, one leading to the other. One leading to the other, go on increasing without any tendency to show down. Especially in those places where there is strong trade union and scarcity of labor is existing, we find there is a wage price spiral is possible. Wage rise leading to cost of production rising, leading to cost of living increasing, leading to increase in the wage rate, again going subsequently all the severe effects of inflation one to the other. A vicious circle is existing, that is known as built-in inflation or wage price spiral. Wage price spiral inflation. Number 4, double dip. Double dip. Double dip. Double dip is a term from US experience. From US experience, we have another new term in connection with inflation known as double dip. You know, in USA, 2008-9 period, there was a severe depression. Crisis was there in USA 2008-9 period. In 2008-9 period, when there was a crisis situation existing in the US economy, Obama government at that time, Obama government introduced monetary packages to stimulate the economy. To stimulate the economy, monetary packages were introduced. And as a result of government effort, monetary packages introduced in the country, they could revive the economy. That means from the low level crisis, low level activity, the economy could revive. There was a revival, they could revive the economy, but that revival was a short lived, only for a small period. That revival was existing in the US economy. Subsequently, by 2010-11, again there was a second dip, a second floor crisis. A second crisis happened in the US economy 2010-11 after a revival from the first depression. First depression, after that there was a revival due to government effort, but that was a short-lived expansion. Short-lived expansion. By 2010-11, again the economy went down. About one dip followed by that a short period revival. Immediately there is a second dip. Immediately there was a second dip in the US experience, and on that basis we have originated the concept of what is called double dip. Our double dip means what? After the first dip, first crisis, and just a revival from the first crisis, immediately a second crisis happens. A second dip after a short period, revival. After the first dip. After the first dip, a short revival, second time, again a dip immediately causing, and so this is what is called double dip. Double dip. Then number 5, core inflation versus headline inflation. Core inflation versus headline inflation. Core versus headline inflation. Core inflation. Core inflation means inflation in the manufactured article prices. Just like we see agflation here. Agflation is referring to what? Agricultural commodity price level rising. Agricultural commodity prices initially rising, agflation. Similarly, there can be manufactured commodity, industrial commodity prices may be going up and up initially, and such a inflation to the manufactured commodity rise in the price level is what is known as core inflation. Core inflation, manufacturing inflation, commodity prices produced in the industrial sector is going on rising, called core inflation. Head inflation, headline inflation. Headline inflation refers to CPI, consumer price index number. Consumer price index number inflation. That means in the calculation of consumer price index number, cost of living index number or consumer price index number, you take a basket full of consumption commodity, daily consumption commodity in a basket we are taking. What are the most important consumption article of the people in the locality we are taking? For example, rice, wheat, in such commodity. Habitually consumed, commonly consumed by the average family in the community, in the location. And so all these commodity commonly consumed by the average level of population we are taking and calculate the index number of price of this basket full of commodity. Index number, average level of prices. Average level of prices in a mathematical manner we are calculating the average level of prices or index number of prices of the commonly consumed commodity basket. Basket full of commonly consumed commodity we are taking, and we will calculate the index number, average level of prices index number, which is known as CPI, consumer price index number, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ it is known as cost of living index number. And on the basis of the cost of living index number, the inflation rate is also now measured. Inflation rate is measured in India at present based on CPI, consumer price index number. Cost of living index number അല്ലെങ്കിൽ consumer price index number is calculated. അപ്പോൾ when the consumer price index number is increasing, cost of living is increasing, you know that it becomes a most important problem, and the parliament sometimes the opposition party may shout, and next day you may come. Sometimes the headline news of almost all newspaper may be the consumer price index number causing suffering to the people. All these things will become the headline news in the newspaper. That is why it is called headline inflation. Headline inflation because this inflation may not be a headline inflation, because it may not be seriously affecting the cost of living of the people. This wholesale price index number. The core inflation refers to the wholesale price index number, which may not influence our cost of living, and so that it may not be so discussed a problem. Whereas the other thing, the core inflation, this headline inflation being CPI, consumer price index number, cost of living is affecting, it become a whole news for the newspaper, headline news for the newspaper, and hence it is known as headline inflation. Our headline inflation refers to the CPI, cost of living. This is referring to wholesale price index number. Manufacturing, industrial commodity inflation.